Hello and welcome to another episode of T4 Tips, Tricks, Toys, Tools for the Command Line and related. Let me jump in here right away and fire off a command that will take a moment that I'll discuss in just a second in more detail. Today's topic is installing from binaries. So we're taking a step back from some of the command line bash and Vyobo tricks. So we're running in Vyobo on the left hand side if you want to learn more about that. And we're getting back to basic installation of binaries. So I'm calling this a dual T4 and R4 series show because I've written and videoed about it in R4 as well. It's a big topic and it affects people quite a bit. I'm focusing on Ubuntu here because installation from source can be tricky and not everybody is familiar with how packages work, how compilers work, how to read error messages appropriately. So it is a hurdle and we generally try to help people to get over that hurdle. And installing from binaries is one. So even though it's generally source on Linux, you can get binaries if you know where. I've worked on that quite a bit with various CRAN to Deb automation attempts, apart of course from sticking binaries into Debian. And I should also note that Iñaki told us that Fedora now has something, but I haven't really heard about how well it's going and how many people are adopting it. But if you're on Fedora, take a look at that as well. What I'm going to show today is live. It's running on the left-hand side, basically 3 different ways to get from an empty system, how you may be confronted with an Ubuntu box when you buy the machine that way, or when you set it up at a cloud provider, or when you take an old computer and install Ubuntu on it. The first setup will just be from bare bones Ubuntu. I started the Ubuntu 2004 container. There's basically nothing in it. It doesn't even have VI. So that's running now, and it's just basically running 4 commands that I regrouped in a really simple shell script that's in the repo, and that will be on the next slide or 2. I'm also going to show a container I had prepared a while ago, maybe a year ago, that takes the setup from the little shell script and already pre-registers it in a container. So you can just use the container and then follow through. That's quite nice, so we'll do that then. And finally, there has been some recent change, an offering by RStudio that I think is primarily aimed at the commercial market and the enterprise customers, but it's quite remarkable. They have a thing they call an RStudio package manager across several Linux distributions, and Ubuntu is among them. And with little help from some friends, we figured out how to use that too. And there is a first container that uses that, but it's still pretty new, and there's some rough corners there, but we'll get to that in a second. It's definitely worth looking into. So one important thing and point that I think I should stress more, while I have written and spoken about this a few times in the past, I've often couched it in the context of containers. And I should make this very clear. There's nothing here that limits this to containers. We simply use containers because they provide us an excellent venue for starting from a clean slate. When you set up a container, it's as if you set up a new physical machine anew and wipe everything out. And given for these little talks and shows, I don't really plan on wiping my machine and reinstalling it, nor why should I? Because I can simply use a container as a proxy for what an empty machine would look like. So again, everything we do here is, yes, in a container, but it's not limited to containers. So the first one already ran. I forgot to put a time command in front of it. I think it takes about 4 minutes. So see, we started from empty, and success, we have the TidyVerse. Having done that, let me start the other 2 so that they run off. So I now want exactly this one. Why don't we then time this and start this one off, and in the other shell we do the same with RSPM and time the one command there, and I'll go over what those do in just a second as well. Okay, now they're both running. So again, what we were showing was just in containers, but not limited to containers. Works on any Ubuntu machine. So first approach, the one that we ran first and then is finished, it basically does 4 things in order to go from an empty Ubuntu machine to one with CRAN binaries and R binaries. We have to add 2 repos. One is a so-called PPA, Personal Package Archive, something Canonical offers via the Launchpad site. And there's a particular command you can use to add a PPA to your system. And we need to first put this command onto the box. So that's the first step. We then add a second repository mirrored at every CRAN mirror of Ubuntu binaries of R itself. That is not set up as a PPA, so it uses a different command. With that, we've basically added 2 repositories to our basic Ubuntu box, and now the Ubuntu box knows about both R and about 4,000 and a few hundred CRAN packages, including TidyVerse again. So we once again use the TidyVerse package as a benchmark and just install the TidyVerse. That's now happening on the left at the top. And I apologize for the small font here. I should probably have shrunk the comments in and made the font larger, but you'll have the slides so you can get to the PDF, so you can get all of that line by line. This is basically the 4 commands, and there's a 5th one there. We just set one environment variable to show or to declare that the installation shall be non-interactive. Otherwise, we will get prompted for the global region that we're in. It doesn't do that heuristically based on the IP that you'd have. That also wouldn't work on my network because it's just in a Docker, and the Docker itself is in on 192 network. So anyhow, so then it just defaults back. And apart from that, environment variable declaration is really the 4 steps that I described. Get software properties common so that we can use the PPA edition, call add apt repository to add the PPA, put an echo in the list file for apt to know about the repo, declare the GPG signing key for the repo, and then we just go off to the races, update the indices again, and install TidyVerse once more, which has happened on the left. And that session now has TidyVerse, as has the one at the bottom. I've now blanked the the timing away, but you can still see this took about 1:40, whereas the one at the bottom took 1:50. I may get back to that. So it's essentially, call it a tie. I mean, it's not really meaningful. And same at the bottom, we can also run library TidyVerse. So as promised, I gave you TidyVerse 3 different ways in binaries on Ubuntu. So, but back to the how-to of the very first approach. The last step then really is, after we've declared the repos, we do one update step from both repos and the default Ubuntu repos so that it knows about packages and dependencies, and then just say, install me the TidyVerse. This is now in the Ubuntu universe, so we use the Ubuntu package manager, and so the CRAN package is by convention called r-cran-package name, all in lowercase, and we're just saying -yes here, again, to be non-interactive so that it flows automatically, as we've seen earlier on the video that preceded. The second approach basically takes the setup step from the previous slide and pre-codes them in a Docker container, in a Rocker container. I call that container r-ubuntu, and once we have that installed, we really only have to do the one step of updating the updates, updating the listings, calling update, and then installing the package once again. The difference of 1:40 versus 4 or so minutes before was that this is a container that already has R, so it starts from a slightly richer base and has to add fewer packages, essentially just the TidyVerse, but not R and some Python things and what have you that we needed in the other one. So that one's pretty good, and it's probably my preferred recommended setup. It's r-ubuntu from Rocker is ready to run. You don't have to do any setups. You just install the packages that you want, and off you go. And it covers about 4 and some thousand out of all of the CRAN binaries. It's pretty good, and I think as a community we can build on that. One key advantage that this has is the packages are genuine packages in the Ubuntu sense. So if you install, for example, rcran PostgreSQL, it will have the Postgres drivers in there. If you install rcran ODBC, it will have ODBC drivers. That's not the same case necessarily with the last and newest offer, which is a very interesting offering, but it's not tied to the system. A package management system was offered from the application software, from R, not from the system. So it's slightly different, but it's definitely interesting, and we will be hearing more of that, and it's already quite widely used, for example, in the GitHub Actions. What we do here then on the shell is just use the shell command to install a package, and note that the package lingo here now uses the R package names rather than the Ubuntu package names, because again we're working with the package manager that goes grafted on top of R and redirects a couple of operations there. So that also worked, as we saw on the left, completing our triplet of 3 steps to go from 0 to TidyVerse binaries. That's what I wanted to talk about this week, to hopefully clear up some of the confusion around binary installs. If there are questions, please use the issue tickets at the repo for this Lightning Talk video series. It's the repo edelbittel/t4 at GitHub. So if there are questions, requests for clarifications or follow-ups, by all means, put them there, and maybe we all can sort of discuss and take next steps. This is the 8th show, so I've done this now for 8 weeks in a row every Sunday. I haven't quite figured out what I'm going to do going forward, because at some point I'll have to get back into normal sort of fall mode and reserve my Sundays for other stuff. So I'm not quite sure if I'll cram a few more sessions in or how many I want. I have a few topics that I want to talk about for Emacs, but that may be more than a few shows. So maybe we'll take a break. Maybe I'll do 1 or 2 more. So we'll see. This time around, no promises. This may have been the last one for a little bit, but I'll hope to be back with more of these. It's quite gratifying to see that these are used. I get the viewer count from YouTube, and that's quite interesting. Again, the series resource is a repo at edelbittel/t4 at GitHub, so file issues there and other things. This is the usual list of slides and handles for GitHub and Twitter, as well as the repo again. And for completeness, the aliases that I used for Docker, which I may have mentioned in a previous show, are included here as well. It's all on the slides. That's all that I had for today, and hopefully you'll find this beneficial for getting binaries onto your Ubuntu systems. Thanks.